Hey, this is going to just blow your mind, but right behind me are the ruins of the wall that held up David's citadel. I'm talking about David in the Old Testament, 3,000 years ago. You know, David that slew Goliath. And I'm going to be sharing about that whole story in the Valley of Elah in just a couple of days. But, all of Jerusalem really began with the vision that God gave David. And there had been a Jebusite city here, and of course David took over the Jebusite city, and then he unified the tribes of Israel by establishing his political and then also religious headquarters right here in what would be called the city of Jerusalem. But it all began, I just want you to think about this, it all began with the prophet Samuel going to the house of Jesse. And you remember Samuel had really disqualified himself as a king of Israel, and he was being resistant to God and walking in disobedience. And so he lost the kingdom, and God was going to choose for himself a king. And so Samuel rolls into the house. He sees Eliab, who was the oldest son of Jesse, apparently, a good-looking, strong guy. And Samuel says, because this is the way the culture would have worked, he's the oldest, surely the Lord's anointed is before me. And God says, no, I have not selected him. And so Samuel literally goes son by son by son until he gets through all of the sons that were present. And he says to Jesse, is there anybody else? And Jesse said, yeah, well, I got another boy. He's the youngest, and he's out in the field, and he's just, tending the sheep. And David's brought in. And God says, that's my man. That's the one I've chosen. And, he says something so powerful to Samuel. He says, hey, listen, don't judge by external things. I look at a person's heart. And, I just want to encourage you today. Sometimes we have that tendency to just evaluate ourselves on worldly criteria, and we compare ourselves to people and how smart are we, or how good looking are we, or what is our personality? Are we outgoing? Are we charismatic? And we use all of these criteria, and sometimes we disqualify ourselves from what God wants to do in our lives because we just don't measure up in a worldly sense. And God just settles such a strong principle here through the prophet, right? Through the man of God that still needed to learn something, and that is this: God looks at the heart. God looks at the heart. Man, is your heart for God? Are you sold out for the Lord? Do you love him like David did, just so faithfully as a shepherd, and really allowing himself to be used by God? That's what God chooses. He chooses the man with the right heart and the woman with the right heart. Be that person.